Welcome, everybody. This is the Election Security Forum, sponsored by Albany Unitarian Universalist Society, Green Sanctuary Committee. I'm Chris Bystroff, the chair of that committee. We periodically have forums like this at our location on Washington Avenue in Albany. Today we're going to have Lulu Friesdat give us a talk on election security, but before I introduce her, I would like to acknowledge the donors, the sponsors. Nobody donated, but we had a number of sponsors, and I think those sponsors are responsible for the huge number of registrants we have for this forum, more than ever. We were co-sponsored by smartelections.us and Citizens for Voting Integrity New York, InvisibleWeStand Upper West Side, NYCD-16 Indivisible, and the Sierra Club New York State Atlantic Chapter. And I thank them for their support. And with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Lulu Friesdat. Lulu is a journalist and a documentary filmmaker whose election security investigations have received over 4 million views and have been featured in Politico, The Hill, Now This, MSN.com, The Young Turks, The Christian Science Monitor, Salon, and Truth Out. Over the course of more than a 10-year career in network news, she's had assignments with NBC, CBS, Nightline, and has contributed to Emmy Award-winning programming at ABC. Her first documentary, Holler Back, Not Voting in an American Town, was featured in The Hollywood Reporter as part of a group of thoughtful and provocative films being made by women. She is a co-founder of Smart Elections, and you can follow her on Twitter using @LuluFriesdat. So I would now like to turn the floor over to Lulu Friesdat.
Hi, how are you? Thanks so much to everyone for coming. Thanks so much to all the co-sponsors for getting everybody really excited about this incredibly important issue. And I'll start by just telling a little anecdote about myself. When Chris said I'm going to be talking about data for half an hour, I kind of cringed. I was like, oh my God, that sounds so dry. So I want to give you an anecdote about how powerful data can be. And it's a very personal anecdote, but I asked my husband and he gave me permission to share it with you. So when I've been with my husband for 13 years, and when we first moved in together, I noticed that I was doing a lot more of the work for like running the household, something that I think a lot of women run into. And it was actually hard for me to get my work done in my career because I was spending so much time on house issues. And we both kind of were aware of this, but it's a little touchy to talk about it and we weren't quite sure what to do about it. So being the data person that I am, I decided to collect data. So I created an Excel chart, which we called the Harmony chart, and we each entered our hours into the chart each week that we contributed to the house. And what we found was that, yes, in fact, I was doing more, and we could see how much more. We could see literally how many more hours per week I was putting in. And what was amazing about this is that as soon as my husband was actually presented with data, with the metrics, his behavior changed, like almost overnight. He just started doing more. He could see in the chart that I was doing more, felt bad. He started to do more, and he put it in the chart. And after that, like the next 2 years after that, he actually did more than me around the house. And now he is responsible for almost all the cooking, a lot of shopping. Like that chart has literally changed my life. It made me capable of doing so much more in my career, so much more comfortable in my relationship. It was one Excel chart, one basically data sheet. Data can be incredibly powerful. Data can change the world. What we know about, we can take action on. Things that we don't know about, things that we ignore, things that we maybe suspect but never actually investigate are very, very hard for us to take action on because we don't clearly understand them, and so we're not motivated to take action. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is data about our elections. And unfortunately, some of it just isn't that pretty to look at. Some of it is results that we suspect are not accurate. And we don't like to talk about that. I was actually going back and forth on email with some of the democracy groups, and one of the women expressed a lot of reservations about joining the coalition, about participating in this work. She said, really, we need to focus on getting voters informed about the candidates and, you know, not depress the turnout in any way, not discourage people from voting. But actually, there was a Harris poll that came out in 2018 that indicated that people were more likely to vote when they were concerned about hacking. So this narrative that we can't talk about hacking, we can't talk about the fact that our elections are kind of a mess because people won't vote, that's just not true according to the data. So this is what we're going to talk about tonight. And I'm going to start to throw some slides up, and I do encourage you to keep at least a little video clip up on your screen, because I think that it does get sort of tedious just to watch slides all the time, but I think the slides are useful. So let's see if I can get my slides going. Had them up earlier. Sorry, I'm just trying to get it into the slide view so that it takes up the whole screen. Okay, that should work. And now I should be able to share my screen. Sorry about my little technical glitch here.
Is it not letting you share, Lulu?
It's hard to keep my screen up, my slides up full, and then get my Zoom up to share my screen. So I think what I have to do actually is go out of the slide view, go into Zoom, share my screen, and then go back into the slide view. So let's see if I can get it to do that. Okay, now I'm going to share my screen. There we go, share. And now we're going to start with this slide, and we're going to go into full screen mode. Okay, and can you still see me, Chris?
Yeah, up in the side.
Okay, great. So I think we're all aware that we're having a lot of problems with our elections right now. We have seen words in the press like catastrophic as a prediction for what's going to happen in 2020. Disastrous, meltdown. We had a very, very difficult set of primaries. State after state had long lines. We had here in New York, where I live in Westchester County, we had lines up to 4 hours long. Some people were not done voting until 1 in the morning. I know in LA, they had 3 to 4 hour long lines. In Georgia, they had 7 to 8 hour lines. So that is something that I think everyone feels is unacceptable. And we're also having a lot of problems with people receiving absentee ballots in a timely way, people receiving information about their polling location, where it is, if it's the right one. And there's also a lot of very justifiable concern about voting machines and that they're not secure. And that's the reason why people are anxious about that, is because they're not. We have a lot of vulnerabilities in our equipment, and I'll be talking about that and also showing a video clip with one of our technical advisors. So one of the things that has happened because of this is that we've had a tremendous loss of confidence in our elections. And in fact, this was a 2016 AP NORC poll that showed 9 in 10 Americans lack confidence in the country's political system. That's shocking. That's appalling. That's just not acceptable. And we need to start asking why. Why have we had such a tremendous loss of confidence? And one of the main reasons is that we are not running elections in a neutral, professional way. Here in the US, our elections are partisan. And that is not the way that longstanding democracies around the world run their elections. This quote here is from an article that I wrote for our website after the Iowa primary, where the Democratic Party really had a disastrous performance in administrating that primary. And I spoke with, actually emailed with Professor Pippa Norris at Harvard, and she said that the way that US elections are run is a pure conflict of interest. That's a quote, pure conflict of interest. Adding that in established democracies, there are normally election commissions with neutral and impartial professional civil servants. She cited a number of examples, the UK, Norway, Germany, many democracies around the world are run in a more professional way than here in the US. And one of my favorite examples is Australia. The Australian Electoral Commission places special emphasis on political neutrality to provide Australians with an independent electoral service. And this is just a little poll from their website, which I love. It's some of the behaviors that can actually get you fired from the Australian Electoral Commission. And those are things like campaigning for a political party or standing as a candidate. Here in the US, Brian Kemp was a candidate for governor as he was actually administrating the election in Georgia. He was Secretary of State, counting his own ballots for governor. Huge conflict of interest. And we have that here in New York, in Westchester County, which is one of the counties I was talking about that had so many problems. The election commissioners are each the head of their political party. So the head of the Democratic Party is the Democratic election commissioner, and the head of the Republican Party is the Republican commissioner. And we have that actually in many counties here in New York. Again, huge conflict of interest. You have political parties responsible for counting their own votes. And one of the results of that is potentially that you can have inaccurate election results. And we don't always know why election results are inaccurate. I think there's certainly concern about it. And the concern is, are these simply mistakes? We all know that errors happen, or because these are elections that are run by partisan individuals and impacted by political parties, is it possible that these inaccuracies are actually favoring one party or the other, that these inaccuracies are potentially a type of voter suppression or a way to shift the votes? And I'm going to talk about some of these inaccuracies that we've actually documented. So I'm going to start with Florida. In Florida, this is in 2020, in the recent primary, the Democratic primary, there was a citizens audit. And what they did was they took photographs of poll tapes and they compared them to the certified results that were reported. And they did find discrepancies. They actually found quite a few discrepancies. I don't have time to go through all of them with you, but I'm just going to go through a couple. And what does that mean exactly? What is a poll tape and what is a discrepancy? So a poll tape is basically, it's like a little cash register, kind of a little spool usually, that a voting machine will print out at the end of the night that has all of the votes on it that have happened on that machine in the course of the night and or through the course of the day, or for early voting, like maybe through the course of the early voting day. In some states, it is required for those poll tapes to be posted on the precinct windows or on the walls. And so in Florida, in this citizens audit, they went around and they took photographs of these poll tapes. So what they found was sometimes, for example, in this particular precinct, they had a poll tape that showed 47 votes, but 89 votes were reported. And then they went in and they talked to the county about it, and the county was able to find another 47 votes, but there were still 20 votes missing, totally unaccounted for. And then there were other precincts that actually had more votes missing. Here we see 21 votes missing, 94 votes missing, 25 votes missing, 89 votes missing. These are serious numbers for a precinct to be missing. And I spoke to Perry Busby, who was the journalist who broke this story and was involved in aggregating all of this data. And I said to Perry, what does that mean you didn't get a chance to resolve these discrepancies? Because I know that he had gone in and spent time with the supervisor of elections there. And what he said to me was, well, it has been difficult making contact for the past few weeks. They are directing all questions through their public relations guy. And unfortunately, this is what we see happen when we find discrepancies. Many times, election officials don't want to have the issues addressed. We had actually somebody on the pre-call when people were just chatting who was talking about the exact same thing. He had found some discrepancies and the election commissioner was actually very upset that he made them. He actually said he had just privately told her, but she was angry. And we know that election officials are working really hard. Often they're underpaid. They don't have enough volunteers. They don't have enough staff. They're overworked. We understand that mistakes can happen. And most election officials are really doing their best to do a good job. But we still need to hold our election officials accountable. NASA doesn't say, oh God, we're just so stressed out. We just can't get these numbers right. We don't know if the spaceship's gonna blow up or not. I'm sorry, we're just too stressed out. We can't do the math. They don't say that. They take their job seriously and they do the math to the best of their ability as accurately as possible. And that should be the standard. Elections are incredibly important. Elections decide who sends people into space or how we spend our resources or what happens to our water or air or if we go to war. Whether or not we're gonna take action on things that people are really passionately concerned about immigration and the climate and student loans and taxes and all kinds of things that people care passionately about, those issues are decided by elections. And if our results are not accurate and we cannot hold our election officials accountable, then all of those decisions that are being made on potentially faulty decisions. So I'm going to show you a couple other instances where we know that we have false data or we know that we're concerned about the results, that the results were potentially not accurate. And Chris, I'm going to pass the baton to you. This was actually an incident that Chris, who's one of the organizers of the event here, encountered. And I was shocked when he told me. This was actually really shocking to me as someone who lives here in New York. We count on that 3% audit to help us determine if the election results are accurate. And that turned out not to be the case when he went and checked on it. Chris, do you want to talk about what you saw?
Sure. Yeah, this was my introduction to insecurity in elections. I was back after the 2016 elections, I heard about the discrepancy between the exit poll and the official count. And I thought, I'm going to go see what I can do to verify the actual count in my local county. And so I went down to the Board of Elections for Rensselaer County and I asked them, can I look at the audit sheets? Because I know that since 2014, New York State has a 3% manual vote audit is written into election law. So they have to take the ballots out of a machine, which they choose randomly. They randomly choose 3% of the machines to do this manual count. They take the ballots out there and they count them by hand. And you can see a blow up of a ballot sheet here where the tally marks are the counts that they've made by hand. And then they sum them up and they compare them to what the machine read when those ballots were run through that machine. And if they're not exactly the same, they're supposed to report that up to the state level. And then the state can mandate a expanded audit to 5% and then to 10%. And they didn't do that. So looking at this, yes, Hillary Clinton got 253 votes from the machine reading, and then it says 253 there, but it's not the sum of the tally marks. And they wrote a little number 220 there, and that's the actual sum of those numbers. And then they had this little plus 38, which I asked them about, and they could not explain to me. In any case, 220 plus 38 is not equal to 253. So I'd call that a discrepancy, and that was just one of many. In almost all of these, contests that were happening that year on this machine, there's a discrepancy between what the machine said and what the ballots said. So now this wasn't universal. I think the next slide, you have an example of another machine they audited where there was no discrepancies at all. All the numbers matched exactly. So what gives? I guess it's not the people, because they can count accurately as this one shows, but the other, so it has to have been something wrong with the machine. And yet, and on the next slide, I think I have the front page of the audit sheets. You can either check the audit results, confirm the electronically tabulated results, no further action is required, or you can check the audit revealed unexplained discrepancies. They chose to check that there were no discrepancies, despite the fact there were discrepancies. Why? And the only thing I can think of is nobody goes and checks the audits. They didn't think I would go down there and take pictures of it. So that's my story. That's the reason I got interested in this, and I think that's what led to having this forum.
Yeah, it was very disturbing to me, Chris. I've been very frustrated with the New York audits. I wanted to film them last year. I got a candidate to sponsor me to go and observe and film. They absolutely would not let me film or take any pictures of them. And then as it turned out, I went down to watch the audit and they said, oh, you know what, we're just setting up today. Nothing's going on here. Should just go home. Next week, we're gonna actually do the audit. Come back like maybe Tuesday. And I was like, are you sure? There's nothing happening today? And they were like, nothing's happening today. And then I called on Tuesday and they said, oh, you know what? We did the audit over the weekend.
And I had the same experience. I asked them when they were going to do the audit. They said, oh, we haven't decided. And then they said, oh, we're going to do it at 10 a.m. And I show up and they say, no, we're not going to do it now. We postponed it. And so it makes me think, I don't know.
It does not inspire confidence. Yeah, it's not confidence inspiring. What's confidence inspiring is when we have transparency, when we are able to watch counting in a public way and we count enough of the ballots by hand that we actually have confidence that the machines are counting accurately. That's what inspires confidence. So I'm going to show you another example of something that is really, really deeply concerning that's happening right now in Georgia. So Georgia just purchased a new voting system. They purchased it from Dominion, which is one of the main vendors. It's called the Dominion ICX. And then that is a touchscreen machine. And then they also have scanners that they use for their absentee ballots, which they had quite a few of. Well, it turns out that the way that those scanners are programmed, they can actually be programmed to be less sensitive so that they don't actually count every mark. I want to just let you sit with that. The scanners can be programmed to be less sensitive so that they don't count every mark. Now you could see where that might be useful if you wanted it to have just a little bit of leeway because you don't want a stray hair to get counted as a vote. But generally speaking, if there's an X or a check mark, Georgia law actually requires that those be counted as votes. Well, in this past primary, in the 2020 primary, there were citizens who were involved in the audit review boards, and what they found was that many, many votes were going uncounted because the scanner was not recognizing them. Often it was a check or an X. And this happened so often that in one of the counties, in Clark County, they actually went back and did another review. And in this review, this is a slide from Adam Shirley's presentation. He was one of the people on the audit review board in Georgia. Keep in mind, they did not look at all of the ballots. Clark County had about 15,000 absentee ballots, and they reviewed a very small number of them, about 300. Of those 300, about 76, the machine kicked out to them to say, hey, the machine wants you to look at this. We're not sure how to count it. And of those, there were 35 contests that had votes missing. So of that 70, those are votes that were not counted by the machine. And what's actually even creepier about this is that particular problem was not what the machine was flagging. The machine was flagging another problem, and then on those ballots that were flagged, they just happened to see when they manually looked at the ballot that there were 35 votes that just weren't counted by the machine. They were just simply shown as no vote, and the review board, when they looked, could clearly see those were actual votes, checks and X's usually. So by Adam's calculations there, that was 15% of the ballots that they adjudicated, and he extrapolated that for that one county. It's potentially over 2,000 votes that could have been missing. And we know that this was happening in county after county. I spoke with another member of the audit review board in another county, Jean Dufort, and they had the exact same experience in their county. And unfortunately, as far as we can tell, none of these, or very few of these missing votes actually were counted. In most of the counties, all but a handful, the counties refused to go back and actually count them by hand, and the votes have now been certified without this being addressed. And in fact, the Secretary of State's attorney said that there was no reason to count these, that it was absolutely fine that the machine was not counting votes. And what's really important to think about here is that this potentially was an accident, but it could also be used deliberately. It could also be used as a way to count some counties more than other counties. If election officials or insiders who are rigging machines actually wanted to do that, and they wanted to, say, have counties that were strongly leaning Democratic or strongly leaning Republican counted more or less, the scanner can actually be programmed to do that, and it is extremely concerning. And for those of you on the call who are New Yorkers, this is the Dominion is the company that makes these scanners and programs this software, and many of the New York machines are also from Dominion. So it's certainly something that across the country that we all need to be concerned about. So I'm going to show you a little video now. I've been working on a documentary, and I've been interviewing a lot of people, election advocates and computer scientists, tech people. This is a little clip from one of our technical advisors, Chris Vickery, who is a risk analyst. Risk analysts are people who go around the internet and kind of poke at things and see if they can access them. So he gets access to a lot of things that he shouldn't necessarily get access to because he's clever and he knows how to find problems. So I interviewed him about problems with voting machines, and this is a little clip from our interview. So let me set this up and see if I can share the screen again. So what's happened here is that Chris has just explained to me that pretty much anytime you have a USB port and you insert a US drive into it, you have the potential to turn that USB drive into an antenna, which basically would function as a modem. He's just, in this interview, finished explaining to me that any USB port basically can be turned into a modem. And I'm kind of in the process of melting down. Let's see if I can get it to play. It's not just the machines that are designed for voters with disabilities. All of the voting machines have USB ports. I have gone and filmed them. They all have
I agree.
USB ports. So they could all have a USB drive stuck in them that then receives a signal and in essence becomes a modem.
Yes. The reason I was talking about different types of ports is everybody knows USB antennas exist in USB modems. People don't necessarily understand that even earbuds or a stylus input can have a modem connected to them. Any input whatsoever. And I am sympathetic to differently abled voters needing to have secure, private ways to vote. And that's a problem we need to tackle, definitely. But machines for everybody is very risky.
But just at the very base level here, what we are seeing is that if there's a USB port, it is very easy to stick a USB drive into it, turn that USB drive basically into a modem, and then send a signal to the machine.
It is possible. The level of easiness depends on how much work you've done ahead of time in researching it. But yes, it is possible for a USB stick to be designed in a way that you just plug it in to an open USB drive, and all of a sudden whatever you plug it into is on the internet. Yes.
Okay, I'm just so incredibly depressed right now.
Don't worry, Lulu. We'll get through this. Americans are very, very, what's the word? We respond well over time. Immediately.
No, it's just a disaster. I mean, we've been fighting all this time, like tooth and nail, to get the modems removed from the voting machines. Like Ginny Cohn is on Twitter like 12 hours a day saying, get the modems out of the machines. Which machines have the modems? Like, you know, focusing on this one little detail, when in fact, all the machines have USB ports, and any of those USB ports can be turned into modems at any given time. Like, we are just so totally and completely fucked. Okay, so I could have gone through scenario after scenario about how the voting machines can be hacked. They can be hacked in so many different ways. They can be hacked by the vendor being compromised and malware being sent out with the official software. They can be hacked by a signal being intercepted on these like kind of fancy devices that the police use a lot. They can be hacked, like we talked about, just with a program on a USB drive. There are just so many different ways that the machines can be hacked, but I thought this one was probably the clearest. Just like any USB drive could basically be turned into a modem, because the drive can have an antenna, the stick can have an antenna on it, and so you could just hook it up to the internet and put malware on it that way. Once one machine is infected, it is often very easy for malware to travel from machine to machine in the course of normal election procedures. Often drives go in and out of machines, or the machines are connected in some ways when they are all programmed, things like that. So there are many, many ways for our voting machines to get malware on them. And what we need to be doing is checking those results over and over and over again. And in the same way that we think of it, it's part of our job to stay informed and research candidates and research issues and then get out the vote. We vote, our neighbors vote. It is also imperative that we add to that cycle of behaviors that we then go and check the vote. We audit the vote. We hand count the vote. We monitor the vote. We do public records requests asking for this data and information. We don't just go home and watch our TVs and like let the election results roll in. Election results need to be checked, and we have to be part of that process. So that's my message. And then I think, Chris, you wanted for us to take some questions.
All right.
And we also wanted to make sure that people know that this is part of a series. We want to have people keep coming back and staying involved in this. So in 2 weeks, on July 20th at 10:30 a.m., I know we have another forum that another group of democracy organizations is co-sponsoring. So we've got your email list. We will be sending you information if you signed up for this, and please keep coming back, stay connected, and I'm going to be asking for volunteers and things like that at the end. So this is ongoing. We can't just like check in once. We need to make this part of our daily routine that we think about this issue.
Okay, now normally at a juncture like this, we would all clap hands, but that doesn't work on Zoom. But you can go click on the little reactions button down below, and it has a little hand clap. So let's give Lulu a hand icon, a little hand emoji. I'm going to look through the chat and pick some questions, and then we'll have a few minutes to go over your concerns. Let's see. Sandy Stubing asks, Lulu, can you address election security outside of machine hacking, like voter suppression or other types of vote stealing?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that machines can actually be used as tools of voter suppression. One of the things that we found in Georgia and other states where it looks like voters of color are trying to be suppressed is just that the machines don't get delivered. So if you're working on a touchscreen machine, and I think they had this in Georgia, I don't want to say which county because I don't remember the county exactly, but one of the counties with a very large population of voters of color, I think they were supposed to have 8 machines and they got 3 machines delivered. You're just going to have long lines because you don't have the hand-marked paper ballots that you can just hand out to everybody. Everybody has to have the time on that terminal, or if you don't get enough electronic poll books and everybody has to get checked in, there's a bottleneck. That is an easy way to suppress the vote. And there's lots of other ways that that machines can be voter suppression tools. Is that the question?
Well, it was, let's see. I'm now looking at the very next question, so I forgot what the question was. Sandy, do you want to unmute yourself and say something?
Actually, that was, this is Sandy, and that was very interesting answer. I was thinking more in terms of the closing down the polling places themselves, which I know is a problem, but I didn't know about this, I didn't think about this, about just not delivering the machines to begin with. So I'm just learning so much because there's so many variables and factors that things can go wrong at any place. And I just want to say that I really appreciate you bringing up the partisan nature of our of who's running the elections, because I think, to me, that's key in rectifying a lot of these problems. Thank you, Lulu.
Absolutely, yeah. And I do want to say, for people who are being recorded, I am a documentary filmmaker. It is possible that I would want to use some of this for a film or for social media. So if you are on this recording, we take that as your consent to be recorded and to have that video used. So I hope that's okay with everybody. And I really appreciate everybody being on here. Yeah, I think what we see is that partisan election officials are focused on maneuvering for their party, and so are therefore less efficient at actually administering elections. So they may be there may be insider rigging of the machines, or they may be buying machines that do not have the best security, or they may be just administrating badly, as we saw in Westchester, where people were sent to the wrong polling location. So I do think that these things go hand in glove, the security and the efficient administration of elections. And I think the more that we can unify that vision, I love you bringing up that point, that we understand the professionalization of our elections will help solve many of these issues. Yes, they are all interrelated, absolutely. Yeah, next question.
Okay, so here's a question by Phyllis Newfield. Now, Phyllis, you can unmute and speak it yourself if you like. Would you like to do that?
I'm not sure if this is part of what you were addressing or not, but all the studies like the Brennan Report and the Atlantic Monthly, when they're talking about voter fraud or mistakes that are made in the voting process, that for those states that do mail-in voting, the statistics are very, very low, like about 0.012%. That it seems to fly in terms of what you're telling us. And I just wondered how you put those two together.
It's a really great question. Thank you for that. So we really need to differentiate between election fraud and voter fraud, because they are two very, very different activities. And they have different levels of we see them at in different amounts. Voter fraud is one individual voter trying to defraud the system, like trying to vote twice, trying to vote 3 times, voting on the same day in 2 different counties or in 2 different locations. That's voter fraud. We have very little evidence that there is much voter fraud. Election fraud is different. Election fraud is the opposite. It is the actual whoever is running the election or somebody who is underhandedly accessing the election, a hacker of some sort, defrauding the public as a whole and changing election results. And in America, in the United States, we actually have a long history of election fraud. That is something that goes way, way back. And I encourage everybody to get this book called Deliver the Vote by Tracy, oh God, what's Tracy's last name? Campbell, Tracy Campbell, who is a Pulitzer Prize nominated author. And Deliver the Vote just goes like year by year, state by state, starting from the very beginning of the Republic, when research indicates that the actual Constitution of Massachusetts, which I believe is the oldest constitution in the country, was actually not legally ratified. When they actually went back and looked at the votes weren't there, and they made it up and they passed it anyway, and nobody ever went back and fixed it. So that Constitution probably was never ratified. And just, he goes chapter and verse. In Georgia, you know, fraud when Jimmy Carter was running for state senate. He couldn't actually get elected because there was this sheriff who just refused to count the votes and would threaten to throw people in the river if they voted the wrong way. We have a long history of election fraud. It's like American Pie, actually. And we just really don't like to talk about it. And that's one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning of the call. Organizations like the Brennan Center, and I will say the League of Women Voters and other democracy organizations, they really don't like to talk about it because they're worried that if people feel that there's election fraud, then they won't go out and vote. And we already have a problem. We only have about 60% participation in any given presidential election. There's millions and millions of people who don't vote already. So I understand their concern, but the fact of the matter to me, and research shows this, is that first off, talking about this does not discourage people from voting. They get more involved, more interested, and tend to vote more. That's what the Harris poll showed in 2018. And secondly, if we don't talk about this, then people aren't going to be aware of it, and they're not going to know that they actually need to do something to solve this, and we're just going to go on pretending that our election results are accurate, and we're never going to know. So to me, at that point, that's when I would give up and stop voting, is if I feel like I'm never even going to know if the results are accurate. We have to talk about this. Absolutely, we have to.
Okay, so we have a question about scanners from Erica Cole. Do you want to speak, Erica?
Hi, I was just curious about the, I have to remember my question. The scanners, you said that they could actually be programmed by party. Did I get that right? I just wanted to make sure I understood that, to be less sensitive by a particular party.
They certainly could be programmed. Now, officially, that would never happen. That's not supposed to happen. But what I'm trying to lay out for people is what is possible. We know that from what happened in Georgia, that the scanners can be programmed, in fact, were programmed to be less sensitive overall, that they were not picking up all the votes. There's sort of a spectrum of how they could be programmed. They could be programmed to pick up every mark from 0 to 100, or they could be programmed to pick up marks from like 12% to 100, which I think maybe is where they were programmed. But there was a whole series of votes that were actual legitimate votes. The machine wasn't picking up on those. Now we want to put that piece of information together with other pieces of information, such as that political parties are very involved in our election administration. That's the first point that we talked about. We have partisan elections. Therefore, if we know that that the software on the scanners can be programmed to be less sensitive and not read some votes, it is possible that a political party that is administering an election could take advantage of that and set that up so that the counties that are predominantly one party, the party they don't like, might have their votes, have their machine software less sensitive, less votes would get counted. And you wouldn't catch it unless you went back and counted those ballots by hand. Even the machine was not kicking out those ballots for adjudication. They found them by accident. So it would be hard to catch. And of course, hackers could set that percentage wherever they want. The hackers can program the machine once they get access to it. It's just a machine. They can program it to do pretty much whatever they want. It's a computer. So does that answer your question? Was that clear?
It was. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I'm not saying that it is happening. I'm saying it could happen.
Have you looked at the?
I'm not saying that it's not happening either. I'm saying we don't know, right?
Well, I'm wondering, have you looked at this? Have you seen that book called Code Red, where they did the analysis and they seem to say that indeed it was done by party? Have you seen that?
I have seen Code Red. I do know Jonathan Simon very well, and he spent years trying to wake the public up to some real uncomfortable data in our election results. And it's also something that no one really wants to talk about. Often the exit polls are not matching the certified results, and then they adjust the exit polls to match the certified results. And you know, officially that's because the exit polls aren't designed to count, that aren't designed to actually determine who wins the election. But it's very vague and it's very confusing to me. In other countries where we monitor the elections, we use the exit polls to determine if there's an election that we think we should be concerned about. That's exactly how we use the exit polls. We compare them to the certified results, and if there's a difference, we say, hey, could be a problem here. But here in the US, for some reason, we don't use our exit polls that way. And there's a site, tdmsresearch.com, where Ted,
Theodore de Macedo Suarez.
Flores, right, Ted Suarez, thank you, has put together quite a bit of data about how the exit polls don't match the certified results. I find it concerning, but people, the media doesn't want to talk about it, and I really don't know why. We have time for maybe one more question, and then we should move to solutions. No more questions? I explained everything perfectly? Okay. Yeah?
Hey, Lulu.
I guess, was I not?
Lulu, this is Jen Carius. Hey.
Hi.
Hi. Hey, be well, okay? I heard you had a little bit of a bout, and really keep this information safe by keeping yourself safe. I'm working on elections officials interviews, asking them about voter registration practices as well as vote counts and COVID preparedness and election results calling, actually, because I think we all need to know that all those things are important and we're all watching them. And I'm completing some in Ohio, and I'm going to do in several different swing states in case folks are interested. I'd love to stay connected. And I'm just wondering in what way we can put the information in one place to make a case. It's just so overwhelming that we've been talking about this for years. And just to realize there's also a cry wolf kind of thing that could be happening, and to really get serious about the research and having credible and accurate, findings in a place for people. And I love that you're incorporating teamwork on the ground too. I do want to keep in touch of where you're working so we can all spread ourselves out, where we be as many places as we can, but we need to document. And we need to prove that this is happening, because it's now so clear with voter suppression, people are being taken off the rolls. We need to prove these irregularities in terms of the vote counts and what to do. And you're going to talk about that. I want to stay connected, and I want to ask what you're doing to keep it in one place, and to make sure people don't cry wolf, that we're actually asking intelligent and firm questions to our elections officials and proving when. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and then going to release that at once. When the election official says, no, I won't answer, or no, you didn't get in when the audit was happening, that stuff needs to be known, and we all need to know where to go, which websites we can go to see which elections officials. So that's my research. So let's stay in touch, but I'm sure you're going to talk now. I'm interested. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Don't spread yourself too thin, because you're doing so many things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. Please email me your contact information so we can stay in touch. Anybody who wants to email me can get a hold of me at contact@smartelections.us. I'm going to just put that into the chat.
We've been in touch too before.
Okay.
Okay.
And can I just address that, Chris? Because that's
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
great transition for us. Let's see if I can get that in there. Okay, that's my email, contact@smartelections.us. So yes, absolutely. I love everything that you said, Jen, and I agree with you. And I was just about to sort of pivot to that. So one of the things that I've done, and there is nothing here now. So when you go there, I don't know what it's going to say except like nothing's here, but I did register this votecount.com website just last week. And that is actually what I plan to do with that, is to start a aggregation website where we can have, in an organized way, Perry Busby's doing research in Florida, and Adam and Jean are doing research in Georgia, and I've been doing research in Massachusetts and some in Michigan. And we're gonna all be able to put our results up there and have it organized so that we can have data and we can have more confidence when there is a reason to have confidence, and when there's a reason for concern, then we can go and look. And I absolutely point taken about Cry Wolf, because I think that is one of everybody's fears. I know there's a big campaign now by Stand Up America to say, I think it's called, I don't know what their slogan is. I think it's Protect the Vote. And their basic message is, whoever wins the election, we need to make sure that it is, their message is, we need to make sure that whoever wins the election actually gets to take office, and that whoever loses the election steps down. My concern, because they're framing it that way, is that they box themselves into a bit of a corner if the results are announced and we find them implausible. I think we need to leave ourselves room to say, we want to check the results. So my message is not protect the vote. My message is count the vote. Let's make sure that the vote is accurate, and let's get the tools to do that. So one of the, let's talk a little bit about how to stay in touch. I'm going to go back to my slides now, I think, and if I can find them. Let's see, let me get rid of this. Okay, and go back to this. And I'm going to talk about two things right now. I'm going to talk about legislation, and I'm going to talk about volunteers. So let's start actually with volunteers, because PowerPoint is not my favorite program. Okay, great. And I think the way I'd have to do this. Okay, then I have to go back into Zoom and share my screen. Sorry, this is so cumbersome. Chris, I'm having trouble getting, oh, I know how to do it. There we go. Okay, there's my share screen. And there's my slide. Okay.
I'm not seeing the screen yet. Oh, here we go.
Yep. I think we're going to get to it now. And okay, so these are the positions that we've wanted for a while with Smart Elections. We could really use some extra help just in terms of keeping things moving forward. As I said at the top of the call, we really want this to be an ongoing forum every 2 weeks where we can come together and connect. One of the things that I find happens is that I just I can't keep the organization moving forward and reach out and respond to all the people who often want to work with us. And so we would be really, really benefit from a volunteer coordinator and even a team of volunteer coordinators who can monitor the email coming in and reach out to people and keep them connected. We would love to have groups all over the country in, you know, many, many states who can use the work that we're doing as a template and do the work themselves on the ground. And these are the different working groups that we're interested in setting up: a social media working group, liaison to other democracy groups, somebody who can help us with apps. The apps that we're interested in working on are Action Sprout and Outreach Circle to help us connect with other people who are interested. We want someone to help us get our newsletter out. We're doing a lot of research on election results. We certainly could use help with fundraising. And we'd also like to get out to more conventions. We did do a presentation at Netroots. Smart Elections gave the first ever presentation on election security at Netroots last year. But then this year, we did not get our presentation selected, even though I think our presentation was incredibly important. We wanted to train people to do exactly this work about checking election results, and didn't get selected at Netroots. So we're going to do a Not Roots forum and teach people anyway, but we could really use people in these different, we want to set up working groups. And so if you're interested in working with us, please, I did put my email in the chat, contact@smartelections.us. Just shoot me an email and we'll try to stay in touch, like Jen said. And then the other point that I want to make is that, there's a couple things. There is a forum in Westchester. I know there's a lot of New York activists on the line. Westchester has had tremendous problems with their elections in this past primary. Many of the problems we talked about, long lines, people being directed to the wrong polling place. And in particular, their commissioners are trying over and over and again to buy the Dominion ICE voting machines, even though the voters there do not want them. Made it very clear they don't want them, but the commissioners are trying to buy them. That machine has a particular vulnerability where it can actually print on the paper ballot after the voter casts their ballot, making the machine basically impossible to audit meaningfully. So if you're in Westchester and you're concerned about that, there's a forum on Wednesday, and I put that information into the chat at the very top of the hour. So if you go all the way up to the top of the chat, you'll see the information about the forum on Wednesday. I know that the Westchester groups really want people to participate in that. And then we also have an entire, there's my email. We have an entire slate of legislation that we are working on here in New York. Some of the bills that we're most excited about are a bill to ban hybrid voting machines. Those are the voting machines that I was just describing, like the Dominion ICE voting machine, because it can print on the paper ballot after the voter votes. And that's a very, very dangerous security vulnerability. We would like to get those hybrid machines banned across the country, actually, but we're going to start state by state. Here in New York, we've already submitted legislation last year, and we're going to push to get it passed this year. We're also going to push for better audits. And also we've got a bill that we think is really important that ties into what we talked about professionalizing the elections, where the first step that we've come up with is a bill to ban party leaders from being election commissioners. That's something that's happening all over New York. Party leaders are election commissioners in county after county. It is a huge conflict of interest, and we've introduced legislation, or we're working with Amy Pollin, who's a legislator here in New York. She's been incredible. She's been such a fighter last year, put in so much legislation, and we're working with other legislators to try to get, in particular, those 3 bills passed. There's really great groups in New York: Citizens for Voting Integrity in New York, the Concerned Voters of Westchester, lots of Indivisible groups, the groups that sponsored us here, like the UU and the Indivisibles and Sierra Club. So connect with any of those groups because they are working on this also. So I'm going to turn it back over to Chris now to see if there's anything else that you want to touch on in terms of actions.
I think you touched on some very good actions. The only thing I would add is to show up for audits, to find a way to get informed about where those audits are going to happen and be there. And those are our last line of defense against hacked elections. So,
Right.
Yeah.
And we need better audits. The audits that are taking place right now, for the most part, are really not robust, not meaningful, because they are on too small a sample of ballots usually, and also are usually it's like a 1% or a 3% audit. And what security experts have said is that we need to be doing random sampling of the audits or doing full hand count audits. So we need better audits as well.
Right. I know there were a lot of questions out there we didn't get to, and I'm sorry about that. But what I'm going to do is I will save the chat and we'll post it somewhere where you can see it. I'd also like to encourage everybody who wants to stay in touch, send an email indicating that to, if it's all right with Lulu, the contact@smartelections.us, and we'll build.
Yeah, I'll do my best to get to questions. I can buzz through here and answer some of these. The status of the ES&S Express hybrid in New York is that it is on track for certification. They are just moving right ahead, even though it lost tens of thousands of votes in Pennsylvania. See if there's anything else here.
Somebody asked about auditing the machines, and what are they talking about?
It's a different type of audit that's called a logic and accuracy test usually, and that's usually a test to see if the machine is doing what it's supposed to be doing. That's a good test to do. We actually think sometimes those tests are kind of meaningless, because often when they do a logic and accuracy test, they test the machine in test mode. So the machine knows that it's in test mode. Like if anybody followed the Volkswagen adventure, the Volkswagen cars were tested in test mode and they knew they were in test mode. And then when they were out on the road, they were just pumping out pollutants, all over the place. So unfortunately, often the logic and accuracy tests are done in test mode. So it's a problem with them. That's a whole nother bag of marbles. Anything else, Chris?
I'm looking, but I would also like to plug the movie, Kill Chain, the Cyber War Against American Elections. It's an HBO movie, and it was available for free, but I think now you have to be on HBO to see it. But it's worth it. And it talks about how you hack these machines.
Are you taking questions?
Well, it is 8:05, and so, but if anybody wants to hang on, I'll be here for as long as people would like. So it's up to you if you want to hang on to here. I know there's some people I haven't gotten to. Barb Spink had her hand up, and but so up to you. Lulu, do you want to keep going, answering questions?
Why don't we do 5 more minutes? Just 5 more minutes.
I have a quick question based on experience. So I had a neighbor. He's passed away, but he spent several years as a poll worker, and he pointed out how poor the training was and how in some cases the testing was inadequate to confirm their skills. And he even brought people in at the last minute when they were short people, because I don't want to generalize, but it's usually retired people that do the poll working to get a few extra dollars. So what's being done to improve the quality of poll working?
I know that there's a couple groups that are really concerned about this. I know that Common Cause, for example, has made professionalization of the Board of Elections one of their key issues right now here in New York. And certainly improved poll worker training, I think, would go along with that. But I agree with you, Mark. It's a very serious issue. You need more resources, better poll worker training. Absolutely. Agreed.
I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've worked the polls many times, and you have to have equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats representing the poll workers. So when you said that elections are partisan, could you expand on what you mean by that?
Well, the people running the elections, for example, in New York, they are partisan, they are appointed by the political parties. That is how they become election commissioners. Here in New York, in order to be an election commissioner, you have to be appointed by either the Democrat or the Republican Party. And so your loyalty is often to the party more so than to the accuracy of the elections. Now, granted, the poll workers coming in, as you said, are generally supposed to be polled from, and equally from the parties, but the heads, that the administrators of the elections themselves are appointed by the parties here in New York. And that's the same around the country in many, many cases.
So who determines what party is making the appointments?
Well, in New York, the Constitution states that it has to be the two parties that had the most votes in the last election. It always winds up being the Democrats and Republicans because those are the parties that get the most votes. It's part of the New York Constitution, which actually many people would like to see rewritten. But as it stands, it's very hard to change the Constitution. So that's how it is right now. Anything to do with elections has to be done in a bipartisan manner by the two parties that had the most votes in the last election.
So how is that partisan if both parties are represented?
It's partisan in the sense that it's not neutral. When you have other democracies, this is what I was trying to explain about, for example, in Australia, the administrators of the elections in Australia have a loyalty to no political party. And
so who could we find to be that person?
Well, it's, it's hard, but certainly I think we can get our elections further removed from partisan politics. To have, Brian Kemp, who's the Secretary of State, counting the votes as he's actually running for governor is about as partisan as you can get. And he was not the only one. There were 3 different elections, I think one in Indiana and another state, where the Secretaries of State were counting the votes in their own election as they were running for other offices. So it may be difficult, but we certainly could get further removed from partisan politics than we have now. But we certainly could.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Carol had a question. You want to unmute yourself?
So if lots and lots of problems and errors and funny stuff is apparent after the election, what happens? Could that delay the results even indefinitely? I mean, where do we go from there? I mean, we saw what happened with the election with Al Gore. I wonder if we I'm concerned about that what happens when we got a mess.
I think many of us are very concerned about that, Carol. I share your concern. And that's why I'm so interested in data, because we need to actually count the votes. That is how we make decisions about the transfer of power in this country. Not who programs the machines the best, who actually got the most support from legitimate voters. And so I think we need to, I don't think we're going to have results immediately. And I think it's better that we slowly and carefully count the results in public with meticulous chain of custody. Those ballots should be monitored by videotapes, and they should be counted publicly until we're confident that we have determined who actually got the most votes.
What if we cannot get confident?
I think we have to do the best we can, and that is why I think it will take many, many people to do this work. I actually want to take a moment and April, are you on the line? Because there's a group that's working on this, and it's called Scrutineers. And I would love for April Smith-Ziegler to give a little plug for Scrutineers, because that's a great group to get involved with if you're concerned about doing this work. April, are you still on the call?
Yes, yes, I'm here. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you tell us
Hi.
about Scrutineers and what they're doing?
Yes, so scrutineers.us is the website. And by the way, I'm speaking for the founder of Scrutineers, Emily Levy. She couldn't be here tonight. It's an online community of volunteer election security advocates, so anyone can join it. We're approaching about 500 members since the site was launched earlier this year. And we're looking to train and activate thousands, we hope, of volunteers in as many communities across the country as we can. to protect the 2020 elections, which including doing what we can to check actual vote counts. And that's part of the training, is that we have tools and things that we can do to look into and check the facts. So the site is scrutineers.us, and it's a membership community. Emily's charging $1.99 to join, a lifetime membership, and the idea is just to keep the trolls and the bots off the site. So if you're interested in learning more about it, check it out. You can sign up to be a volunteer. There are trainings, videos, and they're all recorded. If you'd like to get involved in protecting the vote, this is a place where you can go. And it's about protecting the vote. You know, what happens after you vote. There's a lot of attention, as Lulu was describing, in getting someone to the vote, into a place where they can vote. But there's not very much attention to what happens to your vote after you cast it. And there needs to be a lot more attention on that. And I have been frustrated, as many of you. I see the chats going by, you know, why isn't this covered by the news 24/7? It's mind-boggling. And I don't know the answers. I can speculate on them, but I don't know the answers, and it's extremely frustrating. So if you're interested in that, give it a whirl.
So
Thank you so much.
the spelling of that is INEERS?
No, it's called Scrutineers.
Right,
So
but
it's S as in Sam, CRUTINEERS.US. It's in the chat. I'll put it in again.
Great.
April, they're saying it's not working. We got feedback scrutineers.us didn't work.
That's odd. It should work.
No,
All right.
case sensitive. It's not case sensitive.
Okay, well, somebody put another scrutineerscommunity.org in, so try that one. And or just Google it. I know it exists. I've been on there. So
that one does work.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much, April, for that. And then we will put everybody on our mailing list. If you registered for this, if you don't want to be on the mailing list, then just say please remove. We'll get you off there. But we do want to stay in touch with you. And you can follow me on Twitter at Lulu Friesdat. You can check the website, smartelections.us. We are going to have information there, like I said, about legislation and future forums. And I saw one more person with a hand up.
Yes, I had a question that Daniel Pincus asked, and I'm not sure if he, I don't know the details, if he's got them right, but his really important question was, do Democrats have enough seasoned election challengers to match what he says is Karl Rove's 50,000 seasoned election challengers? Is that being discussed?
I saw an article that Biden had hired lots and lots of attorneys. I think that's a good thing. I think, but more important than that, I think common voters like us, you and me, need to be at the polls, at the audits, paying attention. You can do a public records request and find out in your county, for example, do the number of votes match the number of cast ballots? Simple reconciliation, things like that. So come back in 2 weeks and we're going to start talking about the specifics and we'll get into it. So
about the training.
Come back and we will keep building this knowledge base and we will get ourselves trained and ready for November. Yes. Thank you so much, everybody. It's really amazing.
Can I suggest just one more thing? I wrote it a few times in the chat. Why don't we just do tweet storms to Rachel Maddow, Trevor Noah, Stephen Colbert, Amy Goodman, shows like that? Why don't we do tweet storms, petitions, and phone calling and just blast them to put this on their shows on a regular basis?
Okay, maybe you're going to be our new social media liaison.
Oh, no, I am so untechnological. It's unbelievable.
Okay, so, we're doing what we can, and anybody is welcome to tweet their favorite hosts, and I would love to go on Rachel Maddow and talk to her about this. I was, for a while, talking to Joy Reid's staff about getting on their show, but absolutely, I do think we need more exposure. But there are
many groups that can help get that started.
Absolutely. Go for it.
I have a quick question.
No, we need to wrap. I think we've really gone
Okay.
over time. Come
It's
back
in
in
the
2
chat.
weeks. Come back in 2 weeks and we will talk more. The next forum is July 20th at 10:30 a.m. I look forward to seeing you. Okay.
Thanks, everybody. You can all start, if you're on Twitter, by following Lulu Friesdat, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to both of
everybody.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.